I had a busy bank holiday weekend then. I've done a bit of digging. Well, a lot of digging. If you don't like weeds, then today's video, it's probably not for you. But if you want to see the messy and slightly apocalyptic start to what is my most ambitious and exciting garden project yet, if you want to see my 2 biggest palms finally in the ground, and if you want to see the humble beginnings and go through my plans for what will hopefully be my favourite area in the whole garden, this is the real focal point, then stay watching. Grab some cheap popcorn, sit back and enjoy my plans for the fire pit area. A really exciting sunken fire pit surrounded with all kinds of Mediterranean exotic planting. Let's go for it. I filmed this video then yesterday or Saturday night and it's been a very windy day. As you can probably see, most of the blossoms gone off for cherry trees now. That looks so amazing just a couple of days ago. Next door's, well, let's just say the tent's trying to escape. It's definitely trying to climb over that fence over there. So it's a bit of a blustery day. And I will be doing a full garden tour video very soon. As soon as I've had a little bit of a tidy up, got rid of some of the weeds that you will notice plenty of in today's video. But as you can see, if you can ignore the minor little touch-up jobs required, there's a new focal point in the garden. And it's that Jubutia palm. My hybrid palm that I've had in a pot for around 4 years now, it's finally got a place in the ground and it's pride of place bang in the middle of the garden, the sunniest end of the garden in this brand new raised bed. Now this has been my project for the last few days. I'll show you around quickly, then go through my plans in a little bit more detail. Hopefully you can hear me over the window right. Now what I should say is this definitely isn't completed. In fact, I haven't even finished digging out. But already now you can hear my voice probably changing. When you sat down in here, you feel like you're in a completely different place. Suddenly you can't see any houses around you. You feel almost sort of comforted, wrapped by all these exotic plants, or at least you will do once there's more of them planted. So let me quickly show you around and we'll do that from the highest point. So looking down here then, this is the fire pit. Or at least where it's going to go anyway. My original plan was for a circular fire pit, but that changed to a square, or something that will be around a square anyway. As you can probably see, there's plenty of weeds around it, and this is something that I actually started digging out, I think it was early last summer. I had a mad day, dug out probably about 5 or 6 tons of earth, and I made a start on it. But then, as things always do, the weeds started moving in, time rolled on, and it's only been this past week I've actually restarted the project. But I've really gone for it. I've gone big and I've made it a square. And that is for a couple of reasons really. Firstly, it's a lot easier to make the retaining wall if you're making a square one. And secondly, we actually stayed up at Massam in some, we'll say circular posh camping sort of buildings. And what we found is, although they were quite big, because they're circular, you couldn't really lay out on the floor properly. There wasn't enough room for a sun lounge or anything like that. So that's kind of what I've gone for here. I've gone for a big square, so there's plenty of room. It really maximizes the space. But I'm sure I'll really try to get that sort of natural edge by using a lot of natural materials. It's definitely not going to look modern, and hopefully it will look as in keeping as it possibly can do. So we'll start at the back then. I should say this isn't really a path, it's just where I've dumped the earth. And the first thing you'll notice here, this is my eucalyptus grove. So we've got 3 different ones. This one here, eucalyptus, this one's Mount Buffalo, and it's a fantastic one. Just look at that amazing sort of red foliage. The new growth on them is absolutely beautiful. Then we've got neglecta, which is a really cool eucalyptus. This one, it's got square stems, I don't know if you can see there. The new stems are all, they're very square with sort of red edges, and it's got huge leaves. So if I show you further down here, look at some of the juvenile foliage in that. You see with my fat hand next to it, they're absolutely massive. And then here, we've got an absolute giant of a eucalyptus. This is one that could get really, really tall. So that's why it's gone at the far end of the garden, where there's nothing for it to damage, no foundations for it to crack or anything like that. Now, a lot of people, they don't like planting eucalyptus because they think, A, they grow really big really quickly, which some do. There are some varieties like this Buffalo, which although they do size up quickly, they're not going to become monsters and they won't get anywhere near the sort of 30-metre plus heights that some do. But the other reason is that they suck all the moisture out of a place. And I suppose in a lot of garden situations, that can be a downside. But here at the far end of the garden, most of my planting is going to be exciting arid desert style plants. Plants like this Dazzlerian here. I want to grow lots of exotic style spiky plants in this area, plants that don't need a lot of extra moisture, and in fact really do prefer a raised spot like this, very well drained, which this spot will be, an absolute sun trap, which again this definitely will be. And these eucalyptus, yes, they'll help to dry the soil out at this end of the garden, which might help in winter, but to be honest, my main reason I planted these is just because I think they're really beautiful. I love the foliage in eucalyptus plants, and to me, you've got that scent, you've got something fast growing that you can actually see mature month after month. You can see them growing almost visibly. And I think you've got something, a tree that's evergreen, that'll help provide shelter, and it'll also really give that exotic background, because I don't want to be looking at this red fence all the time. Yes, I've got some palms and things around here, a few clumping bamboos dotted around. As you can see at the minute, I think the dominant plant is actually nettles, and that's because I planted all my Fasicularia up here and I mulched. I did everything that I should have done, but I realised I had a bit of an issue. Because I planted the Fasicularia quite late, I then couldn't start pulling up too many weeds because I didn't know where the bulbs would be. So probably in the next couple of weeks, I'll have a little weed round, get rid of all the nettles before they get too bad. I think they've come in from next door, shall we say. So I want to get rid of those. But either way, I wanted to do today's video because now is an exciting time in the project when you can really sort of see the whole area and get a feel for what I'm trying to create here. So at this part, we've got the apple tree. That's got beautiful blossom at the minute, and that's one of the few plants that was actually in the garden when we moved in. That's staying. I've got my bulbs around it there, and these will be joined with some more permanent planting. I'm thinking small Chamaerops palms maybe. Lots of drought tolerant, tough plants that will take anything that our UK weather can throw at them and not need a lot of additional watering. That's probably the key for this area. The plants that will be going in here, they need to be tough. They need to be able to take and thrive in full sun. They can't take a lot of moisture, and they shouldn't need any winter protection. That's my general theme. But I think what we'll have is a really unique, exotic area of planting. But before we get on to the actual exciting part of the plants, let's look at my actual plans in terms of hard landscaping. So what I'm going to do over the next couple of weekends, it's amazing just how much earth you can move when you actually put your mind to it. And this is only really, so we'll say 3 days work in total. What I'm going to do is dig all this soil out, get the earth down to maybe another foot down from where it is now. And this is all earth that I'll be using elsewhere in the garden. What I actually used to build this part of the bed up here. And then I'm going to have a retaining wall built. Well, I should say I'm going to build it myself. That's the only way I can save enough money for plants by actually doing these hard landscaping jobs myself. And what I'm going to do is basically have a square retaining wall running all the way around this area here. Just look how many weeds there are. I suppose I should really be ashamed to show these in a video, but I'd rather give you a bit of reality, the actual start that I'm moving on from. So what I'm going to do, build the wall around the outside. This area here is only really access, but I quite like the way that it's a narrow little path. It gives the impression that the garden just keeps going on up that way, so that might just stay. But this bit here, this is the main entrance into the fire pit. And this will have a retaining wall on each side. You'll enter here, and the actual floor will be made of cobbles. Now, you might have seen my videos talking about the big move that we had to this house, all the hundreds of plants I've moved here. But the other thing that I might not have told you is about all the hard landscaping materials. When we moved here, I had the Luton van we used to move, and I actually moved about 8 ton of cobbles. So I've got loads of really rustic, really weathered, beautiful cobbles. They came from a farm only about 5 miles down the road, and that's what we're going to use to line this avenue here and the fire pit. So I think it'll look absolutely fantastic, and it will be an absolute sun trap. And what I'm going to do then, I'll have the retaining wall on the edge, I'll then have the floor made out of cobbles, and running round to the outside of the whole fire pit, I'll have a bench built into the wall. So you've got loads of room to sit around. I won't say parties because we're not that raucous really, but we'll say enjoy this area on those sunny days, those beautiful summer evenings when the sun is just setting like it is now, but hopefully a few extra degrees of temperature. So that's the general sort of plan for the actual hard landscaping. Now, when it comes to planting, I'll show you the exciting bits first. These are 3 of my biggest palms. Palms that I've been growing in pots for absolute years. I think I've had some of the smaller ones like that one there, the Cerifera. I've had that for maybe 5 or 6 years in that pot. And this the huge Jubutia. This was well overdue a place in the ground. And as you can see, I finally got it in. Still some roots to cover up there, but I've got most of them into the ground and covered over. And then that beauty there, that is a Vulcano. Now, you might have seen me plant some smaller Vulcanos in my POV videos, but this is an absolutely beautiful specimen. I know in some of my videos I do use the word absolutely quite a bit, but this one, it completely deserves it. Just look at it. It's an amazing specimen plant. And I think the reality is, I definitely knew at the time I was buying these, well, let's just say as a good investment, something that would certainly save a lot of money over buying it in subsequent years. And I bought that big Jubutia. I took a bit of a risk on it. I bought it the month before they introduced the palm ban, which basically added restrictions to bringing palms into the UK. I bought that just before. It wasn't completely rooted, so it's needed a lot of TLC, but as a result, it started putting out loads of fronds. Now, you might see a little bit of browning on some of the older ones, and that's completely natural for palms that have been grown in the warmer parts of Europe and then brought over here. This one was actually just brought in before the beast from the east, so it took a little bit of damage, but luckily it's only cosmetic. And you can see there the new fronds in the middle. They've taken -6 or so last year, no protection, no problem. And again with the Vulcano, that's a palm that can tolerate full exposure. As you can imagine, I'll just show you the actual leaves or fronds. They are very stiff. They're almost like a waggy or Wagnerianus, so it's a very wind resistant palm, and it's also a very tough palm too. I don't like to quote specific hardiness figures, but let's just say these 3 palms, I shouldn't need to protect them unless there's a very bad winter. And if things are that cold, I'll be protecting a lot in the garden. But my priority here was basically have plants, beautiful plants that can thrive in this sunny spot. Probably my best planting spot in the whole garden. And the third big one I've gone for is this Chamaerops humilis Cerifera. Now this one, I think it should have had a bit more water last summer when it was in a pot, but now it's finally in the ground, it'll settle in fairly quickly and it'll start pushing out some beautiful blue leaves. This variety is similar to Vulcano, but it's definitely got an entirely different colour to the new foliage especially. On plants that have been grown well in full sun, it's a beautiful light blue colour, so that one has the potential to be a stunner here. So I've got my 3 biggest palms, and these are palms, believe it or not, I almost accidentally planted. What I wanted to do last weekend was plant the Cerifera to give you an idea of the level that I was going to build up to here and the kind of planting I have around it. Because believe it or not, me just showing you a big hole in the ground, that would take a leap of the imagination to say the least. So I wanted to have an example of my planting, the Cerifera there looking over the whole area. But then I came around here and I sort of realised this whole area is built up obviously of the soil from that big pit there. I realised that to actually complete this and cover up the edge of those slabs, I needed to put the Vulcano in. So I moved it in and it was an absolute battle. I did it on that really sunny day. I think it was Easter Sunday or Monday. Believe it or not, I planted all 3 of these palms by myself in the same day, and that Jubutia, it really took some grafting. So what I thought is the Vulcano was in, I got the soil moved up around it to cover up the roots, stop them drying out, and then I had a bit of a step. The ground was around, say, 8-10 inches tall, and I thought, I'll just sit the Jubutia pot on there, so you've got an idea of the positioning, and that I definitely knew it was the right spot for it. Because my original plan was Jubutia there, Vulcano there, but my plans had changed a little bit. We'll say they've evolved. So I wanted to position the Jubutia, make sure I was 100% happy with it. And then I thought, if I'm going to put it here, I might as well chop the bottom of the pot off. Unfortunately, that was the one pot that I just knew I wouldn't be able to remove. 285 litres in soil, it really was a heavy palm. And I think, in fact, if it was another 10 kilo or so heavier, I wouldn't have been able to plant it myself. It really was on the limit. So my plan was cut the bottom off, put it there, and then I knew I had it in the right spot and I could then fill it over this weekend. But you know how things go. I realised looking at the pot, I've chopped the bottom off. All I need to do now to actually plant it is just to chop the side up. So I use an angle grinder, carefully cut up the side of the palm, or the side of the pot should I say, and then I realised I might as well just put the soil around it, and before I knew it, yes, it took a lot of effort, but it was in the ground. So that's how I accidentally planted the biggest palm in the garden here. But I think these 3, they're an absolute trio of beauties. And as you can see there, I planted another Mediterranean dwarf fan palm in the middle. I'm not 100% sure on the placing of that, but I do quite like the idea of having all this sort of palm foliage hanging over the fire pit area, completely wrapping around you. You might be wondering about the rocks, and that's what I've done this afternoon. So before we moved house, I bought around 5 or 6 of these absolutely colossal granite rocks. Again, overusing the word absolutely, but these are monsters. I think the smaller ones weigh, we'll say a couple of 100 kilos, something like that. Definitely getting on that way. I've got an even bigger one that was possibly just over 1/3 of a ton because the tail lift on the van wouldn't lift it. So these took a lot of effort to get here, and it's taken me a huge amount of effort to get them up the garden and then finally in the place. You might have seen them in my garden tour videos last year. They were just dumped here rather unceremoniously, but now they've finally been put into place. I've done this afternoon with the help of my trusty lifting bar. That thing is an absolute godsend for moving anything like this. And what I've done is I've tried to position them with the bottom edge just sunk into the ground. And what you find with any large boulders, if you can have the bottom edge just sunk or recessed slightly into the ground, it looks so much more natural. Rather than just having a boulder dumped on the earth, it looks like it's part of the landscape then. And if you're wondering what my plan is for the area immediately above these, well, firstly, I'm going to backfill it with some soil from the hole. Now, this is going to be a bit of a game, really. It's like one of those games where you can only move a square at once and another square becomes available, because I'm going to have to move the mud out of there to then bring the sand and the cobbles into the hole. They need to take up some space. I need to fill this in. It's going to get a little bit messy because I'm then going to need some soil to go back in around the retaining wall, but we won't worry about it too much. I think, like with anything in the garden, at the end of the day, it's just playing around. It's all fun, and I'm in no rush to get any jobs complete. For me, I enjoy this probably more than any other part of gardening. My plan for this area then, well, I've actually got a load more smaller rocks. Rocks like these ones here that I got off Facebook Marketplace. I was lucky to find a couple of groups of them that I think bought for £20 each, and they almost identically match my large granite boulders. So they'll do just perfect. And my plan is to build the area up. I don't want to use the word rockery, but I really want to have an impressive yet natural looking, we'll say more of a cliff face really, almost like a scree garden. And then I want to have some exciting exotic planting mixed in it. So this is the perfect area, full sun, lots of exposure. It's really great for some tough exotic planting. Maybe a smaller euphorbia, definitely some agave, maybe some sedums, and then lots of exciting little plants to really fill the gaps in. Now, you might notice that the soil here, this is a soil that I've actually dug out from the fire pit, and ordinarily I would be a bit careful with it, because all these plants, to grow really well and to make it through winter cold, they need really good drainage. And in most gardens, if you dig down, you get clay. Now, when we moved into this garden, I did actually look at the soil. Obviously, everyone does that when they first move into a house, don't they? No, just me. I looked at the soil and it was really good. But what I couldn't have seen is at this end of the garden, if you dig down a bit, you get lovely sandy soil, which is absolutely perfect because it saved me having to get rid of a load of clay. I've literally been able to reuse all the soil that I've dug out, and I won't need to dig in a load of sand. So what I'm doing is basically backfilling to pretty much get the level that I need. And then I'm going to put my plants in, build up the soil around them. You don't have to dig loads of holes with this, you can just fill the soil in around the plants. And then add a little bit of grit just around the key plants like agaves to give them that little bit of extra drainage. But either way, I think this is a really exciting opportunity. I can fit some lovely plants in here, some beautiful agaves, and I've just managed to get myself some more montanas, like these ones here, which get really big, very impressive. And then also some ovatifolia, which is a lovely sort of silvery blue agave, which again, hopefully is one of the better varieties to grow in the UK. Might need a bit of overhead cover in winter, but can take serious cold. So that is my rough plan for this. And hopefully you can see as I spin round, just look at all these exciting planting opportunities. Well, hopefully you can see what I can see in my mind anyway. But as this wall's built up, it means that the borders around here, especially this left-hand side that gets full sun, they'll be raised up significantly. So they'll probably be somewhere around here, nearly the same height as those flags that I put in at the back. I put those in when we first moved in because I knew I was going to have a raised border at this end. So my plan is then get the walls built, and then I can backfill with some really well-drained soil. And then I can really get on with some unusual and spiky exotic plants. So we've got the Dazzularian, and my theme for this area is spiky but tall and imposing. I've been given clear instructions from Alice and a bit of common sense really. We don't want spiky plants pushing in people's faces. So my solution to that is not just have little spiky plants far away from you, have huge spiky plants that really grow upwards. So I've got some exciting yuccas, some that have been growing in pots for years, and others that I've bought fairly recently. I've really got some beauties, some giant tree-like yuccas, some hybrids that I'll look at in a future video. Let's just say if this area comes together how I want it to and how I think it can, it's really going to look impressive in a few years' time. So I suppose really the key plants other than the palms, yuccas and agaves. And to me, that combination of plants, I've seen it in other gardens. I saw Crete Lodge in Yorkshire Chris's video last summer. Their garden looks amazing. I followed them on Instagram for quite some time. And then if you Google Paul Spracklin garden, he's got an incredible garden down in Essex. That really is probably my inspiration. I remember seeing it on Gardener's World, we'll say 5-6 years ago. He's got cacti, spiky plants, all kinds of different Dazzularians, yuccas, so many different plants, all different but all with the same spiky theme, and that's really what I want to create. Now, walking back up this way, I'd like to say I have a definite plan for this area. There's a giant grass there, just to give it a bit of a backdrop. But this area here is probably my biggest decision. I've got the chance of an olive tree. Now, you might have seen in my video, look at Linden Nurseries, some of the huge olive trees there. I can't justify the biggest one, it's too much money for me at the minute, but there's a slightly smaller one that we'll say something can be worked out on. So I'm really tempted to go for that. Now, an olive tree, they're not completely hardy in the UK, but I think for getting that established Mediterranean look, nothing's better. And if you look up there, I think that spot will be beautiful. It'd be an absolute focal point once you're in the fire pit, hanging over this edge here, that lovely foliage. So potentially I'm going to go for that. But then my planting around the edges of these banks, it's amazing really how just a bit of digging can change your flat area that you might struggle to put a design together, to suddenly digging down, realising you've got a load of spare earth. Obviously it was part of a plan, but realising you've got spare earth, it opens up so many exciting planting opportunities. So I've got so much space now on these slopes when they're finished. There won't be any nettles there anymore, but I'll have all kinds of tumble and exotic plants, small flowers. Basically, if it loves sun, if it needs a lot of really well-drained soil, then this is the area for it. So hopefully you can see my vision for this area. I know this video's been a little bit unpolished, and to be honest with you, I don't know many of the gardening channels that would happily show you such a collection of weeds like this. But I'm really excited to get on with this area. And I think I can make this just a real paradise, I suppose, at the end of the garden. So when you're sat in here, lowered down, all you'll see around you, beautiful palms, spiky plants, towering over you at a safe distance, obviously. Some agaves that you won't see many of in the north of England. And then maybe something a little bit different for that side there. Now, one thing that I will just show you before we finish, this area here. This area won't be quite as raised as the far side. So here I'm putting some of my hybrid palms. And what I'm thinking is my 3 hybrid waggy palms. The hybrid Princeps crossed with Wagnerianus. They'll be a very stiff palm, very wind resistant, hopefully very hardy too. So those will be the perfect counterpiece to these beautiful palms here. So basically what it'll be like as you're walking through here on a beautiful summer evening, you'll have the lovely towering hybrid palms there. You've got the big Jubutia there, which in theory is one of the fastest growing hybrid palms you can actually get. I'm excited to see that really take off now. You've got all kinds of other Mediterranean fan palms over there. You walk down here, huge yuccas here towering over you. I've got some rostrata that have been pot grown for several years now. And as you head up, you'll see the beautiful eucalyptus leaves blowing around in the breeze there. That lovely scent in the summer. The apple tree in full growth. And then all kinds of different salvias, euphorbias, and a whole riot of drought tolerant, really bold, structural, colourful plants. So that's my plan. As you can imagine, I've got a lot of work to do. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.